After dedicating 10 years to building my husband's family business, he turned on me and teamed up with his father to kick me out as if I meant nothing. His mother sneered at me, calling me worthless, while his father just smirked and said I should consider myself lucky they put up with me this long. I walked away feeling small, humiliated, and broken, going back to odd jobs. Then a quiet client reminded me that my old shares were still mine. When I saw their worth, $47 million, I froze. "You were always useless, Harper," Isabella Whitmore said with a laugh. Not cruel, not angry, just cold and matter-of-fact, like she was talking about the weather. Like all those years of my life meant nothing at all. I sat in that restaurant, rain pounding on the windows, feeling the velvet box press into my palm. Inside was a necklace I had spent 3 months saving up for, our initials entwined, custom designed by a jeweler in Brooklyn, who had patiently listened to me talk about Lucas for an entire hour while sketching ideas. 10 years together, I thought he must have planned something grand, something romantic. But I'd been so blind. The envelope sat between the salt and pepper shakers. 3 months' salary. That was all a decade of my life was worth to the Whitmore family. Just 3 months. James Whitmore cleared his throat again, that familiar sound signaling the conversation was over. "We'll need your key card and laptop by Monday morning. Security will escort you out." Security. Like I was a criminal. Like I hadn't built half of the empire they were celebrating. Lucas still couldn't meet my eyes. My husband of 10 years sat there, wearing the cologne I bought him last Christmas, staring at his wine glass as if it held the answers. His silence was louder than all the words his mother had thrown at me. I was 26 when James hired me, fresh from Columbia with an MBA I had paid for with loans I was still struggling to repay. Lucas and I were newlyweds back then, living in a Brooklyn studio so cramped that we took turns getting dressed each morning. When money was tight, we ate ramen 3 nights a week. I thought the Whitmore job was a dream come true. Good salary, a real title, a chance to prove myself. During the first week, James called me into his office. "I'm giving you 3% equity," he said, sliding papers across his massive desk. "A symbolic stake to make you feel part of the team." I signed without reading carefully. Who questions a gift? Who argues when a miracle is handed to them? I spent the next 10 years working hard for that miracle. I rebuilt their entire supply chain from scratch. The Whitmore Group used to be a small, regional business, profitable but stuck with outdated systems and old contacts. I changed everything. I negotiated contracts in Singapore with manufacturers who had never even heard of them. I spent 3 weeks in Sydney convincing distribution partners we were worth the risk. I introduced automation that cut costs by 37%. 37%. I still remember that number because James framed the report and hung it in his office, telling the board, "This is what excellence looks like." But it wasn't Harper's excellence. It was just some airbrushed idea of excellence created out of nowhere. I missed our 5th anniversary because I was in Seoul sealing the warehouse deals. Lucas had been understanding at the time. "You're building our future," he told me over the phone, his voice distant and fuzzy across 12 time zones. "We'll celebrate when you get back." But we never did. There was always another deal, another crisis, another long night that bled into the next morning. Marcus, Lucas's younger brother, I spent 3 long weeks in Sydney trying to convince distribution partners that we were worth taking a chance on. I also rolled out automation systems that slashed their operational costs by nearly 40%. 40%. That number stuck with me. It was more than just a statistic. James had the report framed and hung it proudly in his office. "This," he told the board, "is what true excellence looks like. Not just Harper's kind of excellence, real excellence, as if it just appeared out of nowhere." I missed our 5th anniversary because I was stuck in Seoul locking down warehouse contracts. Lucas was understanding, though. "You're building our future," he'd said over the phone, his voice cracked from tiredness and traveling across 12 time zones. "We'll celebrate when you get home." But we never did. There was always another deal to close, another crisis to handle, another late night that stretched into early morning. Marcus, Lucas's younger brother, the one everyone underestimated, was quietly watching all this unfold. Marcus, the golden child, had spent those years lost in himself, wandering through art galleries in Prague, attending yoga retreats in Bali, and even a brief, blissful stint at an art school in Florence, paid for by James without a second thought. He just needs time to find his passion, Isabella would say at family dinners, her tone warm but forgiving. When Marcus finally stepped into the family business 2 years ago, he came with a director's title and a swanky corner office. No rebuilding supply chains, no sacrificing special occasions, just a shiny nameplate and a hefty sense of entitlement. Meanwhile, I had been working back-breaking hours until 3 in the morning in windowless rooms, while Marcus was off posting sunlit photos from Santorini. I was the one closing billion-dollar deals. I built the empire that Marcus took credit for, but now here he was, Chief Operations Officer. "This isn't about performance," James said coolly, his voice sharp and clinical, like he was reviewing business reports, not tearing apart my entire world. "It's about vision, about leadership, about family. Family, the very word I'd chased for a decade. The promise that had kept me working late nights, missing every anniversary, sacrificing my own life, hoping that if I proved myself, I'd finally be one of them." Isabella leaned in, her designer perfume wafting across the table. "You married into the family, Harper. That's the difference. You were always just an employee. Dedicated, yes, but still just an employee." I glanced at Lucas and really looked at him, waiting desperately for him to say something, anything to defend me, to defend us, to defend the 10 years we'd built together. But his jaw was clenched tight, his knuckles white gripping the wineglass. He said nothing. "The Melbourne deal," I murmured, my voice sounding distant even to my own ears. "That deal alone was worth $2 billion. I closed it last month." James shrugged, dismissing it as a company success. Team effort. Team effort. 6 grueling months of 18-hour days, midnight video calls, and countless presentations perfected to the last detail. All my work negotiated term by term. But no, it was all a team effort. "How long?" I demanded, looking Lucas straight in the eye. "How long have you known?" Finally, Lucas met my gaze. His eyes were rimmed red with guilt. "6 months," he admitted softly. 6 months. While I was burning the midnight oil, giving everything I had to make them proud, he'd been sitting in meetings plotting my downfall. "The severance package is generous," one of their lawyers suddenly piped up, having gone unnoticed till now, seated silently at the end of the table. 3 months' salary, with benefits extended for 6 months. We're doing more than fair here. More than fair for 10 years of my life, for building their billion-dollar empire, for sacrificing my own life while creating theirs." Isabella's smile was sharp, almost cruel. "You should be grateful. We gave you opportunities you'd never find anywhere else. A scholarship girl from nowhere. We treated you like family." Like family, not as family. The sting of that distinction cut deep. I stood up abruptly. The chair scraped loudly against the polished floor, breaking the careful silence in the upscale restaurant. Other diners glanced over, then quickly looked away. "I need some air," I said firmly. Lucas finally stirred, trying to speak. "Harper, don't," I snapped, the words sharper than I intended. "Don't say a thing. You've said enough already. Or rather, you've said nothing at all for 6 months, which says everything. We were really giving you a break. Opportunities you wouldn't have gotten anywhere else. A scholarship girl from nowhere. We treated you like family," he said, emphasizing the difference with precision. "Like family, not actually as family." The cut was sharp and clear. I stood up so quickly the chair scraped loudly against the fancy floor. The restaurant went silent for a moment, while other diners glanced over before quickly looking away. "I need some fresh air," I said. "Harper," Lucas finally found his words. "Don't." My voice was harsher than I meant it to be. "Don't say anything more. You've already said too much, or actually, 6 months of silence is all you've given." It said it all. I stepped out of that restaurant into the cold rain. No coat to shield me. The velvet box still lay heavy in my pocket. Inside was the necklace with our intertwined initials, a custom piece I had painstakingly chosen. Each lunch skipped over 3 long months. I had been so careful, so sure that it meant everything. The rain soaked through my blouse in an instant, that bitter October rain. It felt like the city itself was washing something away. maybe even washing me away, erasing me the way the Whitmores erased a decade of my hard work. I stood there on the damp sidewalk, water running down my face, blending with tears I hadn't even realized were falling. Isabella's words echoed sharply in my mind, not just their cruelty, I'd heard worse, but how casually she'd brushed me off. You were always useless, Harper. Those words stuck like poison. I knew I'd remember them, I'd carry them with me, and one day I promised myself I'd show her she was wrong. But that night, standing soaked in the rain, I had no clue how I'd do it. I don't even fully remember getting back to Maya's place that night. Just blurry moments. The subway platform, buzzing fluorescent lights, a homeless man asking for change. The sharp smell of wet concrete mixed with car exhaust filled the air. My hands trembled too much to unlock Maya's door on the first try. But she was waiting up, just like always. Maya was the kind of friend who came through, no questions asked. She'd been my roommate back at Colia, back when life felt easier, problems had answers, and hard work meant something. I made her some tea. She didn't ask what happened. She could see it all just by looking at me. I sat down on her couch, the one that would soon become my whole world, and finally let the words out. They fired me at our anniversary dinner. I said it so flatly, like I was telling someone else's story, like I had swallowed all the pain and it was gone. Maya's face twisted through a few emotions before settling on anger. Lucas was there, and he'd known for 6 months. I pulled the velvet box from my pocket and placed it on the coffee table between us. I bought him this with 3 months of saved lunches. Maya didn't ask to see what was inside. She didn't offer empty comfort. She just sat quietly beside me, her presence steady and real in a world that had tipped sideways. You can stay as long as you need, she said softly. Forever, if that's what it takes. 3 days later, I was still staring at her ceiling at 4 in the morning. The water stains looked like continents, maps to places I'd never get to see, places I'd given up on, because there was always one more contract to handle, one more crisis at Whitmore demanding my attention. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was Lucas's lawyer. Divorce papers had been filed. I flipped through them with numb fingers. He was taking everything. The apartment in Chelsea we had saved for over 3 years, the car I helped pay for, even the furniture we chose together, including the couch we fought over at West Elm and the dining table his mother disliked, but we bought anyway because it was ours. I signed the papers without rereading, a blank surrender. Maya tried to stop me. Harper, you're entitled to half the community property. You don't have to just give it all. I spoke more sharply than I meant to. I don't want anything that ties me to them. She saw the finality in my voice and didn't press further. Day 5 brought more paperwork, benefits termination due to the dissolution of the 01k, but I was already checked out, ready to leave the past behind, everything Lucas and those toxic years represented. The word hit harder than I meant. Nothing, let him keep it all. She backed off, sensing that I was done with this conversation. Day 5 brought mountains of paperwork, including my benefits being cut off as the 01k project dissolved completely. After 10 years of hard work, everything I built was stripped down into papers needing my signature. I signed them all right there at Mia's kitchen table, with her cat giving me a look that probably said I deserved every bit of this. You need to eat, Mia said softly that night, placing a plate of pasta in front of me, even though I hadn't asked for it. You haven't had anything real since Thursday. I just nodded and promised I would. I waited until she left for her night shift at the hospital before I looked at the food again. Mia had been a nurse forever, a caregiver by nature, but there I sat, staring at the plate until the pasta cooled down and the sauce separated. I couldn't bring myself to take a bite. The little velvet box stayed there on the coffee table, untouched and unopened. Some things hurt so badly that facing them feels just as impossible as throwing them away. By the end of the second week, I had sent out 42 job applications. I made a list. Companies I'd worked with, rivals who had tried to poach me over the years, and startups desperate for someone with my skills. I customized every resume, wrote personal cover letters, and reminded them of projects we'd worked on together. 3 replies came back in total. 2 were automatic rejections, polite emails wishing me luck with my job search. The third was an interview invitation from a supply chain firm in New Jersey. Finally, a glimpse of hope. I spent 3 days preparing, researching the company down to every detail, practicing my answers to potential questions. I dusted off my one good suit, the same one I grabbed before Lucas changed the locks, and took 2 trains to get there since I no longer had a car. The interview started off great. Patricia, the hiring manager, seemed genuinely impressed. She asked sharp questions and nodded thoughtfully at my responses. Then her desk phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID, and everything shifted in her face. "Excuse me, I have to take this," she said. The name on the screen was James Whitmore. Patricia's tone turned careful, professional. "Yes, Mr. Whitmore. Of course, I understand. Thank you for the update." After hanging up, she avoided eye contact. "I'm sorry, Miss Martinez. We've decided to move in a different direction. We'll contact you if anything changes." But we both knew that nothing would change. That call crushed me. I reached out to my old coworkers after that, people I had mentored, those I'd helped climb the ranks. Most calls went straight to voicemail, and most voicemails never got a return call. Only 2 people were honest with me, Rachel from operations and Tom from logistics. "Harper, I'm really sorry," Rachel whispered, clearly nervous about being overheard. She told me James had contacted their company directly. "If they hire you, Whitmore Group threatens to cut all ties and blacklist us forever. We just can't risk it," she said. Tom was blunt. "You're radioactive right now. Everyone knows it. The Whitmores have everyone scared. Give it time, maybe a year or two." A year or two. Meanwhile, my savings were down to about 2 months' worth of living expenses. Student loans would kick in soon, the same ones I deferred while helping build the Whitmore empire. Even the storage unit, where I kept the boxes I managed to save, was costing money I didn't have. Mia wanted to help. "I can cover your rent," she offered. "No, you don't have to. I'm not going to live off you." Yet there I was, sleeping on her couch, eating her meals, taking up space in a life that wasn't mine. I needed to give back, even if it was a little. That's when I found the Craigslist ad, simple and clear. House cleaning job, flexible hours, daily pay in cash. I stared at that ad for a full hour before finally clicking the apply button. "Thank you for the information," she said flatly and hung up without meeting my eyes. "I'm sorry, Miss Martinez. We've decided to go in a different direction with this role. We'll get in touch if anything changes." We both knew the truth. Nothing was ever going to change. I tried calling former colleagues after that, people I had mentored, friends I'd helped get ahead. Most calls went straight to voicemail. Most voicemails were ignored, never returned. But 2 people were honest with me, Rachel from operations and Tom in logistics. "Harper, I'm so sorry," Rachel said quietly, like she feared someone might overhear. "James called our company directly," she added. "He said if we hire you, the Whitmore Group would cancel all our contracts and blacklist us completely. It's a risk we just can't take." Tom was blunt. "You're toxic right now. Everyone knows it. Everyone's scared of the Whitmores. Give it time. Maybe in 1 or 2 years, things will calm down." 1 or 2 years. My savings would last maybe 2 months tops. Student loans were coming due. Loans I'd put off while helping build the Whitmore empire. The storage unit where I kept the boxes I salvaged was costing money I simply didn't have. Maya tried to help. "I can cover the rent," she offered. "You don't need to," I told her. "I won't live off you." But by then, I was already crashing on her couch, eating her food, just taking up space in a life that wasn't really mine. I needed to do something to contribute, anything. That's when I stumbled on a Craigslist ad. It was simple and to the point. House cleaning services needed, flexible hours, cash paid daily. I stared at that post for a long time before I finally clicked. Direct. House cleaning services needed, flexible hours, cash daily. I stared at the posting for an hour before clicking. Pride is a tricky thing. You don't realize how much your sense of self depends on your job until that job disappears. I held an MBA from Columbia University. I'd negotiated contracts worth billions. I'd built supply chains spanning 3 continents. And now here I was, applying for a job cleaning houses. Mrs. Patterson hired me over the phone. Her voice was soft and warm, like a loving grandmother's, completely indifferent to my resume. Do you have references? Not recent ones. Can you be on time? Yes. Then start tomorrow. I'll text you the address. The Henderson house was in Westchester, big, expensive, the kind of place I once dreamed of living in. Mrs. Patterson met me at the door with cleaning supplies and instructions. Deep clean the kitchen, 3 bathrooms, and the living areas. They're very particular about the baseboards. The job was exactly as you'd expect. My hands soaking in bleach water, my knees pressed against cold tile floors, my back bent over the mop for hours at a stretch. By noon, my hands were raw. By nightfall, cracked and bleeding. Every muscle in my body was screaming in pain. But when Mrs. Patterson handed me $95, cash and tip combined, at day's end, I felt something I hadn't felt for weeks. Relief. Maybe even pride, not the pride of closing billion-dollar deals, but something simpler, purer. Tears streamed down on the bus ride back to Queens, not from shame, but from the heavy truth that I was still functioning, still able to earn money, even if it wasn't the paycheck I once had. Maya noticed my hands that night. "Harper, your hands are bleeding." "I'm working," I said firmly. "You have an MBA." "I'm working," I repeated, stronger this time. "It's honest work, and this is what I have right now." She wrapped my hands without protest. That was Maya. She knew when to fight and when to simply be there. The next few weeks blurred into one another. Different houses, different families, the same hard labor. My co-workers, Rosa and Amelia Chin, didn't ask about my past. They didn't care about my schooling or my setbacks. I was just Harper, the new girl who came on time and never complained. Then October arrived, cold and early. I was cleaning the Riverside estate, 7 bedrooms, 9 bathrooms, more space than most people see in a lifetime. I was emptying a trash can in the master suite when a car pulled up outside. A Mercedes in pristine condition, still gleaming like it came from the showroom. Isabella Whitmore stepped out, sunglasses masking her eyes, probably worth more than I earned in a month. She saw me through the window. I watched her expression shift, from surprise to something else. Satisfaction, maybe a sense of triumph. She walked right over without lowering her voice. "Well, this is fitting," she said. "I heard rumors you did this kind of work." I didn't believe them. Rosa was watching from the doorway. Mrs. Ashford, the client, was watching from inside. Isabella wanted people to hear her. This was a performance. "You are always useless, Harper. Women like me build legacies. Women like you, we clean their houses." She smiled, a sharp, proud smile. "James was right. We were lucky to tolerate you as long as we did." Rosa stepped forward, anger written in every move. But I shook my head gently. "Not yet." Isabella drove away laughing, her voice echoing even after her car disappeared down the long driveway. I finished the rest of my shift in silence, cleaned bathrooms, mopped the kitchen floor, and collected my pay from Mrs. Ashford, who looked uneasy but said nothing. That night I sat in Maya's dark room, finishing my shift quietly, cleaning the remaining bathrooms and mopping the kitchen floor with the Mercedes fading down the driveway. I took my pay from Mrs. Ashford, who seemed uncomfortable but held her tongue. That night I sat in Maya's dark room thinking it all over. I stayed in the apartment until morning light broke through. Something inside me had shifted. Not anger, I was too drained for that, but a colder, sharper feeling. They thought they had broken me down for good, stripping me to this low point. But they were wrong, completely wrong. The morning after Isabella's visit, I woke up on Maya's couch with a strange new feeling settled in my chest. It wasn't quite anger, nor determination. It was something in between, a chilling clarity cutting through the morning air. I had 3 house cleanings lined up that day. The Ashfords' place was last, a sprawling Scarsdale estate that had more rooms than I could tackle in one visit. Mrs. Patterson had warned me about them. "They're particular," she said, which was code for "they're tough to please." Just as I was loading supplies into the van, a sleek gray Lexus pulled up. It was a cold Wednesday morning in late November, the kind of chill that hinted snow might come but wasn't quite ready yet. Luxury cars weren't unusual in this neighborhood, but something about how that Lexus parked, calm and deliberate, caught my eye twice. The woman who stepped out looked to be in her 60s, her silver hair done up perfectly, Clearly regular visits to the salon. The camel coat she wore probably cost more than I'd earn in a month. She walked straight toward me, her heels tapping purposefully on the pavement. "Harper Martinez," she said. My heart sank. No one around here knew my last name. I'd been just Harper for weeks now. Harper the house cleaner. Harper who always showed up on time. Harper who never spoke of her past. "I'm sorry, do I know you, Belle?" I asked. "Catherine Brennan," she said, extending her hand with a firm grip. "We met 7 years ago in Singapore." Slowly, memories crept back, reluctant but vivid. Singapore, humid and stifling. July heat wrapping around us like a thick blanket. An airless conference room where windows refused to open. James sat at the head of the table, wearing the mask of authority, while Catherine Brennan from Tanaka Logistics asked the real questions. I recalled carefully answering her queries. She focused on scalability metrics when everyone else fought over pricing. Her smile was brief but sincere. "You were the only one in that room with real answers. Everyone else was just putting on a show." Compliments felt like traps now, and I didn't know how to respond. She continued without judgment. "I heard you were let go from Whitmore." "Where'd you hear that?" I asked. "Industry whispers," she said. "People notice when someone builds something meaningful and then vanishes." She paused, looking me over thoughtfully. "Family businesses are the worst. They blur the line between loyalty and ownership, confuse duty with contribution." Part of me wanted to walk away, to pretend I didn't know her, and keep what little dignity I had left. But Catherine had been different back in Singapore. One of the rare few who ever spoke directly to me, not just going through James. "Mrs. Brennan," I said. "Please, call me Catherine," she replied. "Thank you for that, but I need to finish loading my supplies. I have a tight schedule." "I know the Ashfords are particular about their baseboards," she added. Not mocking, just stating a fact. "I'm friends with Eleanor Ashford." She mentioned a new cleaner who seemed oddly overqualified. "Catherine, please," I said. "I appreciate you noticing, but I've got to finish loading this van. I have a tight schedule." She smiled, not mocking but observing. "I know the Ashfords are particular about their baseboards." "I'm friends with Eleanor Ashford," she added. "She mentioned you're the new cleaner they hired, someone they say seems way overqualified for the job. You described yourself, and I needed to double-check." The cold crept right through my jacket, and my breath came out in little clouds. "Double-check what?" "That you're truly Harper Martinez, the one who rebuilt Whitmore's entire Asian infrastructure. The very same person who sealed the Melbourne deal, which, by the way, still sets the gold standard in the business for fair partnership structures." Catherine's face grew more serious, her focus sharpening. "I have a question. Do you remember the paperwork you signed when you first started at Whitmore, back when James initially brought you on board?" That question felt heavy, almost dangerous. There was a mountain of paperwork, stock agreements, a minor equity stake. James had always framed it as symbolic, but the memory was hazy, buried under a decade of other contracts and decisions. 3%, I said slowly. "He said it was to make me feel connected, like part of the team." Catherine's smile was razor sharp. 3%? Of Whitmore Group before the Asian expansion, before the automation system you designed, before the 3 acquisitions they completed in the last 8 months using your infrastructure, and before the Melbourne deal that added $2 billion in valuation." She let that sink in, watching my reaction. "The company you helped build is now worth roughly $16 billion. And if they forgot to cancel that equity in your severance, a mistake family businesses often make, you might own more of that company than you realize." My mind tried to calculate, but the numbers felt overwhelming, almost unreal. 3% of 16 billion, 40-some million dollars. It didn't feel real. Couldn't be real. "That's not possible," I whispered. "They wouldn't overlook something like that. James is meticulous. James is arrogant. But arrogant men often slip up, especially when they're rushing to erase someone." Catherine pulled a business card out of her coat pocket. Thick stock, embossed lettering. "Diane Morrison, corporate attorney. She's the best lawyer in New York. Fully ethical but absolutely ruthless. She specializes in cases where women get cheated by family businesses." I took the card without thinking, my fingers numb from the cold and shock. "I have a confession," Catherine said, moving toward her car. "Isabella Whitmore tried to steal a contract from me 5 years ago. She pulled every dirty trick, underbidding, spreading rumors about our reliability, calling in favors with mutual contacts. We lost that contract. It cost us 6 months worth of revenue. I'm sorry." "Don't be, we survived. But I've been waiting for the right moment to return the favor." She opened her car door, then glanced back at me. "You built that company, Harper. Everyone in the industry knows it. Everyone except the whites, it seems. Check your paperwork. Those shares are still yours. You're done cleaning houses. You're a shareholder now, and shareholders have rights." She drove off, leaving me standing in the cold, clutching a business card and a chance I was scared to believe. I cleaned the Ashford house in a single day, scrubbing bathrooms I hadn't seen, mopping floors my mind couldn't focus on. Mrs. Ashford mentioned I seemed distracted. I apologized, saying I wasn't feeling well. Finished the job as fast as I could. On the bus back to Queens, I stared at the business card. Diane Morrison. The embossed letters caught the afternoon sun. I couldn't stop thinking about Catherine's words. "They forgot to terminate your equity. Those shares are still yours." She walked away, leaving me out in the cold with nothing but a business card and a tiny sliver of hope that I was too scared to fully believe. I took a deep breath and cleaned the Ashford house in one long, exhausting day. I scrubbed toilets I couldn't even see clearly and mopped wet floors while my mind was miles away. Mrs. Ashford noticed and told me I seemed distracted. I mumbled an apology, saying I wasn't feeling great. I finished the job as fast as my nerves would let me. On the bus ride back to Queens, I stared at the business card over and over. Diane Morrison. The embossed letters glinted in the afternoon sun. Catherine's words kept ringing in my ears. "They forgot to terminate that equity. Those shares still belong to you." Nobody seemed to care, or maybe they just didn't see it. Finally, Diane looked up. "This is legit, properly filed with the Secretary of State." That night, I just couldn't find a way to fall asleep. Maya was working a late shift, so I had the whole place to myself, left alone with my restless mind and that dusty Whitmore box I had been dodging for years. At 2 in the morning, I finally pulled it out from under the couch, surprised at how much heavier it felt than I'd remembered. Inside was a decade's worth of papers, a mountain of proof that I had once been a part of their world, even if they pretended I never existed. I carefully sifted through it all, page by page, searching for anything that might tell me the truth. Near the top, I spotted the severance agreement. It offered 6 months' pay instead of 3, a non-compete clause, strict confidentiality rules, but there was no mention of equity or shares anywhere in sight. The divorce settlement showed Lucas keeping the apartment, the car, and all the savings we had built together, while I was left with student debt and my clothes. The agreement imposed an NDA. No talking about company secrets, no bad-mouthing Whitmore, and absolutely no mention of stock ownership. All intellectual property I created was theirs, including every single idea and system I built during my time there. But there was nothing about ending equity, benefits cancellation, health insurance termination, or any paperwork for dissolving my shares. Nothing, absolutely nothing at all. Then, at the very bottom of the box, I found it. A faded, creased paper, the original stock certificate. The Whitmore Group awarded Harper Martinez 0.3% equity starting from January 15, 2014. It gave full voting rights and dividend participation, all clearly stated in the company bylaws. Signed by James Whitmore himself, witnessed by their corporate attorney, and officially filed with the Secretary of State. Still valid after 10 years. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the paper. I read it over and over, 3, 4, 5 times, looking desperately for anything that might void it. An expiry date, a buyback clause, a termination notice. But there was none. I grabbed my phone. It was 2:47 a.m. when I woke up, but I couldn't wait any longer. I had to send a message before the doubt swallowed me whole. "My name is Harper Martinez. Catherine Brennan gave me your card. I need to know if I still own part of the company that tore my life apart." Less than 2 minutes later, a reply popped up. "Come see me tomorrow at 9 a.m. Bring everything." I sat there on Maya's couch, clutching that yellowed certificate that might be worth $47 million, and for the first time in months, I felt something fierce. Hope. It was thrilling, terrifying, and impossible to ignore. I didn't sleep after sending the message. I just lay there, staring up at the ceiling until a faint morning light seeped through Maya's curtains. At 6 a.m., I gave in and made coffee, my hands still trembling as I held onto the certificate. When Maya came out of her bedroom at 7, she stopped dead in her tracks, looking right through me. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I told her I might own 47 million. Thus, she blinked, incredulous. "Wait, say that again." I showed her the certificate and told her about Catherine Brennan's visit. I watched Maya's face shift between disbelief, hope, and cautious skepticism. "Harper, are you sure this isn't a scam or some kind of joke?" "Catherine Brennan is real. I worked with her in Singapore. And this," I said, holding up the certificate, "has James Whitmore's signature." "Then why are you cleaning houses if you're secretly a millionaire? That's a loophole they'll slam shut as soon as they catch wind of it." I set my coffee cup down carefully before it slipped from my hands. I had a meeting scheduled for 9 o'clock, an attorney Catherine had recommended. Maya's nurse instincts kicked in right away. "Have you eaten?" she asked. I shook my head. "You have to eat," she insisted, pulling out some bread to make toast. "You can't walk into a lawyer's office on an empty stomach." She warned, "That's how people faint." The toast was dry and bland. Yeah, but I forced it down anyway. Maya wanted to come along, saying she'd call into work, but I shook my head firmly. "I need to handle this on my own." The address Diane Morrison texted me was in Midtown, in a building I had passed by countless times during my days at Whitmore, but never really noticed. Tall glass and steel towers cutting into the sky, the kind that house hedge funds, corporate law offices, and decisions that impact more money than most people will see in a lifetime. The elevator to the 53rd floor held only me and a sharply dressed man in an expensive suit who didn't give me so much as a glance. I wore the same outfit from that failed interview weeks ago, the only professional clothes I still owned. It felt like I didn't belong. Everything felt wrong. The elevator doors slid open to reveal a lobby dripping with wealth. Marble floors, sleek minimalist furniture, and a receptionist who looked like she'd been plucked straight from a fashion magazine. "Harper Martinez," I announced. "I have a 9 o'clock with Diane Morrison." "She's expecting you." The receptionist's smile was polished and practiced. "Conference room 3, down the hall, last door on your right." Diane was younger than I expected, maybe around 40, with dark hair pulled back in a tight bun and a charcoal custom-tailored suit. She stood as I entered, offering a firm handshake that felt more like an assessment. "Catherine mentioned you might have an equity stake in the company that let you go." She didn't waste any time on small talk or pleasantries. It was all business. "Whitmore Group, Logistics and Supply Chain. Is that right?" I answered in a steadier voice than I felt. "Yes." "You brought your documents?" I handed over a folder with the stock certificate, severance agreement, divorce papers, everything I had pulled from that old box. Diane spread the papers out on the conference table with expert precision, her eyes scanning them so fast it was clear she'd been through this routine many times before. The silence stretched, filled only with the sound of her turning pages and my heart pounding in my ears. I became painfully aware of how I looked. Clean but worn clothes, hands rough from day after day of cleaning, the exhaustion that had settled into my bones. Diane either didn't notice or didn't care. Finally, she looked up. "This is all legitimate, properly executed and filed with the Secretary of State. 3% equity, no expiration date, no buyback clause, no forfeiture conditions." She tapped the stock certificate gently. "It's clean." Relief poured out of me, a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Diane flipped through the severance papers next, her expression shifting to something close to satisfaction. "No mention of stock," she said, "not once. They covered intellectual property, non-compete agreements, confidentiality clauses, a comprehensive list of everything except the one thing that really matters. They forgot. They forgot." Diane's voice confirmed what I had hoped against hope. Her smile was sharp, almost dangerous. 3% of Whitmore Group's current valuation, which stands at $15.8 billion as of today. It's clean. There's 3% equity, no expiration date, no buyback clause, no forfeiture language. She tapped the stock certificate confidently. I finally exhaled, not realizing I'd been holding my breath that whole time. Then Diane looked through the severance agreement again. She flipped the pages with a growing look of satisfaction. Doesn't mention it once. Intellectual property, non-compete, confidentiality, all covered. Everything but the one thing that truly counts. They forgot. They completely forgot. Diane confirmed with a sly, sharp smile. 3% of Whitmore Group's current value, which is $15.8 billion right now. The scale hit me like a punch. I was holding a golden ticket without even knowing it. Confirmed. Her smile was sharp, dangerous. 3% of Whitmore Group's current valuation, $15.8 billion as of their most recent filing, showed $47,400,000. That number hung heavily in the air between us. $47 million, more money than I could ever imagine, more than my parents had made in their entire lives combined. If they go public next spring at $20 billion, which is what they're aiming for, and you keep your shares, you could be looking at $60 million. And if the stock performs as the analysts expect, that could jump up to $120 million within 3 years. The room seemed to spin a little. I held tight to the edge of the conference table. But there's a catch, Diane said, and my stomach sank. If they find out you're claiming this stake, they'll attack fiercely. James Whitmore will bury you in lawsuits and legal fees until you're forced to give up. That's exactly what men like him do to women who stand up to them. So, I'm destined to lose. The hope inside me crumbled. I didn't say that out loud. Diane leaned back, looking me over carefully. Here's what they don't realize. Their IPO paperwork, which they filed preliminary versions of last month, has to list all shareholders who hold more than 1%. Your name isn't there. Maybe they bought you out and you forgot. Did you receive $47,400,000? No, then they didn't buy you out, which means they either truly forgot about you or they're committing securities fraud by leaving out an important shareholder. Either way, the SEC would be very interested. Diane pulled out a legal pad and started drawing what looked like a strategy flowchart. Here's how this plays out. We file a formal claim insisting on your shareholder rights. Then we give them 30 days to respond. They'll panic, call emergency board meetings, rush their lawyers. Try to figure out how this slipped through, then they'll come to us with offers. Big offers, scary, huge offers. Offers designed to make you shut up and disappear. How big? The initial offer might be 20 to 25 million. They'll say it's generous, more than fair. They'll add confidentiality and non-disparagement clauses. They'll try to make you feel like you're winning, but you're not. Diane's eyes were sharp and serious. If you take the money, you vanish. The story turns into a disgruntled employee cashing out. But if you refuse, insist on being recognized as a rightful shareholder with full voting rights, you force them to either fight you in court, which slows down their IPO and costs them hundreds of millions, or add you to their prospectus, making you a permanent part of the company. She leaned forward. So the question is, what do you want? Is this about money? Because if it is, I can negotiate the best buyout, maybe 30 to 40 million. You walk away and start over. No one would blame you. I thought about Isabella's laugh. You were always worthless, Harper. I thought about Lucas sitting silent while his family tore me apart. I thought about James's cold dismissal, convinced I was nothing without them. I want them to know they were wrong, I said softly. I want proof, not money. Proof. Diane nodded slowly, like I'd passed some important test. Then we filed the formal claim. We give them 30 days. They'll panic and offer you numbers designed to make you give up. And you say, no, we're only negotiating recognition as a rightful shareholder with full voting rights. This is about principle, not money. She paused, holding my gaze. It will drive them crazy. Men like James Whitmore never lose, especially not to women they think they've already beaten. This will get ugly. They'll investigate you, try to find anything to use against you, make your life. Diane leaned in and said, you look like you're winning, but you're not. If you take the money, you just disappear. Then the story is, disgruntled employee cashes out. But if you refuse, if you insist on being recognized as a rightful shareholder with full voting rights, you force them to fight you in court. That drags out their IPO and costs them hundreds of millions. Or they have to add you to their prospectus and accept you as a permanent player. She leaned closer. So tell me, what do you really want? Is this just about the money? Because if it is, I'll fight for the best deal. 30 to 40 million dollars. You walk away, start fresh. No one would blame you. But I thought about Isabella's mocking laugh. You're always useless, Harper. I thought about Lucas sitting silent while his family tore me apart. I remember James's cold dismissal. Sure, I was nothing without them. I looked Diane in the eye and said quietly, I want them to know they were wrong. I want proof, not money. Diane nodded slowly like I just passed a tough exam. Then we file a formal claim. We give them 30 days, they panic. They'll try to buy you off with numbers to make you give up. But you say no, we only negotiate recognition as a legitimate shareholder with full voting rights. This is about principle, not money. Diane held my gaze firmly. That will drive them crazy. Men like James Whitmore don't lose. And they especially don't lose to women they think they've already crushed. This is going to get nasty. Life's about to get tougher in ways you never expect. They've already made things miserable for me. Fair enough. Diane pulled out an engagement letter. My retainer fee is $15,000. That's the usual cost for cases just like this. My stomach dropped. I barely had $2,000 left. There was no way I could cover that. Catherine had already paid it. Diane slid the letter across the table. She told me her call came this morning, said to think of it as an investment. Apparently, she really can't stand Isabella Whitmore. I stared at that engagement letter. This was real. This was actually happening. If I sign this, it means I'm in for good. If you sign, we're going to war. Diane's face was serious. Wars are messy, but they can be won. The choice is yours. I picked up the pen. My hand didn't shake when I signed. Good. Diane gathered all the papers. I'll file the claim first thing Monday morning. By Monday afternoon, your life is going to take one heck of a turn. I left her office feeling lighter than I had in months. Not because of the money, the amount still felt unreal, but because someone actually believed me. Someone looked at what the Waitors did and said it was wrong. Maya was waiting when I got back to her apartment. She'd taken the day off after all. Well, we're filing a claim for $47 million for recognition and proof. I slumped onto her couch, suddenly drained. Maya, what if this doesn't work? What if they find a way to get around it? Then you're stuck right where you are now, cleaning houses, crashing on my couch, just surviving, she said. She sat close. But Harper, what if it actually works? What if you win? I didn't have an answer for that. Winning felt too risky to even imagine. That weekend, I tried to steel myself for whatever was coming next. Diane had filed the claim Monday morning. By Monday afternoon, she said life would get interesting. She was right. The first call arrived at 2:47 p.m. I was cleaning the Morrison household in Yonkers, no relation to Diane, ironically, when my phone started buzzing. Marcus's name lit up the screen. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. The second call came 3 minutes later. Marcus again, then a number I didn't recognize, followed by another unknown caller. By 3 o'clock, my phone had buzzed 17 times. I excused myself from the Morrison house chores, told Mrs. Morrison I had to take a call, and stepped into her backyard. I pressed play on the first voicemail. Marcus's voice was tight and barely restrained in anger. Whatever game you're playing, it needs to end now. You signed a severance deal. You have no claim. Call me back immediately. Delete. The second message was James, colder, more controlled. This is totally unacceptable, Harper. We treated you fairly, more than fairly. Your severance was generous. This claim is either nonsense or spiteful. I expect to hear from you or your lawyer by the end of tomorrow. Delete. The third message was from Lucas Harper. Please call me back. My father is losing it. Marcus is threatening to sue you into the ground. It's crazy here. We need to talk like adults, for real, as if they'd acted like adults when they plotted my firing for over half a year, as if they'd been adults when they humiliated me at that anniversary dinner. I deleted every voicemail without listening to the rest, switched off my phone, finished cleaning the Morrison house in silence. That evening, Diane texted me an update. 17 missed calls from numbers linked to the Whitmores. The next voicemail was from James. Cold, calculated. This is highly inappropriate, Harper. We treated you fairly, more than fairly. Your severance was generous. This claim is either baseless or malicious. I expect to hear from you or your lawyer by the end of business tomorrow. Then delete. The third message was from Lucas. Harper, please call me back. My father is losing it. Marcus is threatening to sue you beyond reason. It's chaos here. We need to talk like adults. They had schemed to fire me for over half a year. It felt like they were all grown up when they humiliated me that night at the anniversary dinner. I deleted every voicemail without playing them, then shut off my phone. I finished cleaning the Morrison house in total silence. Diane texted me that evening, 17 missed calls from Whitmore-related numbers. Morrison house in silence. Diane texted that evening, asterisk 17 missed calls from Whitmore-affiliated numbers. Perfect. Let them stew in panic. Desperation makes people reckless. On Tuesday, the calls kept pouring in. Wednesday brought an email from their corporate lawyer demanding I stop all false claims against the Whitmore Group. Diane quickly forwarded it to Essie. By Thursday afternoon, they finally agreed to meet. I showed up at Diane's office a full half hour early. I waited in the very same conference room where I'd first signed the engagement letter. I watched those elevator numbers ticking up on the lobby screen. My heart hammered harder with each floor. 51, 52, 53. The elevator doors slid open and James stepped out first. He looked just like I remembered. Commanding, authoritative, simmering with anger barely contained beneath the surface. Marcus followed close behind, his face a mix of smugness and panic. Then came their chief counsel, someone I'd only met once or twice during my time at Whitmore. Two outside lawyers I didn't recognize walked in next, briefcases in hand, like they were soldiers armed for a fight. And then Lucas appeared. He looked smaller than I remembered. Weary, his suit hung looser, like he'd shed some weight. Our eyes met for just a moment before he looked away, and something inside me twisted. Not love anymore, but a faint ghost of it. The memory of what we had before his family tore us apart. James didn't sit down. Instead, he stood firm at the head of the table like he was running the whole show. This is pointless, Harper, he said. That equity stake was just a courtesy, a goodwill gesture when you joined us. Your claim is baseless and frankly an insult. Diane's voice cut through like ice. The claim is legally valid. The equity stake was never terminated. Your severance agreement doesn't mention it. Your divorce settlement doesn't mention it. There's no paper anywhere that cancels Ms. Martinez's ownership. You're mistaken, Mr. Whitmore. It happens, he said, clearly uncomfortable. One of the outside lawyers jumped in. We're open to settlement. Diane nodded firmly. Yes, if you recognize Ms. Martinez as a shareholder with full voting rights, that's a settlement we'd accept. The other attorney spoke. $20 million, our final offer. Ms. Martinez walks away, rebuilds her life, and we all put this behind us. That number hung heavy in the room. 20 million. More money than I'd ever dreamed of holding in my hands. More than my parents earned together in their entire lives. Security, safety, freedom. I looked directly at James, then Marcus, then Lucas, who still avoided meeting my gaze. No, Ian, I said firmly. The room went dead silent. Marcus was first to react. Are you out of your mind? You're cleaning houses for minimum wage, and you're turning down $20 million? I'm turning down $20 million, I confirmed. James's face turned red. $25 million. That's our highest offer. Take it or we'll bury you in lawsuits for decades. We have resources you can't even imagine. We'll drag this out until you drown in legal bills. Diane leaned forward, calm as ever. Your IPO prospectus is due in 6 weeks for final SEC filing. Right now, it's incomplete. You failed to disclose a material shareholder. Anyone holding more than 0.1% must be listed. That's securities fraud, Mr. Whitmore. The penalties are severe. The delays would be disastrous. Your investors will be furious when they find out you hit a shareholder worth $47 million. James clenched his jaw. I saw the moment he realized Diane wasn't bluffing. I saw the moment he understood his options were disappearing fast. We need time to. You were never officially fired. Your severance papers don't mention it. The divorce settlement doesn't mention it either. There is no document anywhere that strips Ms. Martinez of her ownership stake. You made a mistake, Mr. Whitmore. It happens. We want to be reasonable about this. One of the outside lawyers interjected, we are willing to negotiate a settlement. If you agree to recognize Ms. Martinez as a shareholder with complete voting rights, Diane finished. Yes, that's a settlement we might accept. 20 million, the attorney said flatly. That is our final offer. Ms. Martinez can walk away, rebuild her life, and everyone moves forward. The number hung heavy in the air. $20 million. More money than I ever dreamed of having. More money than my parents combined had earned in their entire lives. Security, safety, freedom. I looked at James, Marcus, and Lucas, who still wouldn't meet my eyes. No, I said firmly. The room instantly fell silent. Marcus was the first to break. Are you crazy? You're cleaning houses for minimum wage and you're turning down $20 million? I'm turning down $20 million, I confirmed. James's face flushed red. $25 million. That's the absolute highest we'll go. Take it or we'll drag you through court for decades. We have resources you couldn't even begin to imagine. We'll fight until you're buried in legal fees. Diane leaned in, her face calm and unshaken. Your IPO prospectus is due to be filed with the SEC in 6 weeks. Right now, it's incomplete. You failed to disclose a key shareholder. Anyone owning more than 0.1% must be listed. That's securities fraud, Mr. Whitmore. The penalties are severe and the delays could be disastrous. Your investors won't take kindly to finding out you omitted a shareholder worth $47 million. James clenched his jaw. I watched him calculate, saw the moment he realized Diane wasn't bluffing. I could see him understand his options were rapidly shrinking. We need more time to. Securities fraud, Mr. Whitmore. The penalties are severe. The delays could be catastrophic. Your investors won't appreciate learning you omitted a shareholder worth $47 million. James's jaw clenched. I watched him calculate, saw the moment he realized Diane wasn't bluffing, saw him understand that his options were narrowing. We need time to. Let's talk this over, he said at last. Diane answered firmly, you have until Monday. After that, we're taking this to the SEC. Anger boiled over as everyone stormed out, all except Lucas, who lingered by the door, his voice lowered. Harper, can we have a quick chat? I glanced at Diane. She nodded. Conference room 2 is free. Take your time. The small conference room felt tight, almost choking. Lucas shut the door and rubbed his hair, something he always did when stressed. I get that you're mad, he started. I shook my head. I'm not mad. My words sounded numb. The truth was, I was just exhausted. I'm done, I said. This isn't about me wrecking my family's company. I'm not wrecking anything, Emerald, he replied quickly. I cut in. I'm claiming what's mine. What was always mine. Your dad handed me that equity. I earned it. Then you all just forgot about me when you decided I wasn't worth keeping. We didn't forget. He stopped, caught in the lie. You just what? Hope I wouldn't catch on. Hope I'd be too broken to fight back. Lucas's face fell. They'll drag this out forever. Years of lawsuits. My name in the news, everyone digging into my past. Everyone already knows everything about me, I said. Your mom made sure of that when she found me cleaning houses. Lucas flinched. I didn't know she'd do that. But you didn't stop her. Just like you didn't stop your dad from firing me. You let it all happen. Suddenly I stood, drained. I want them to tell the truth, Lucas. Every investor in Whitmore Group deserves to know that I built what they're buying, that the Asian expansion was my idea. The automation systems were all mine, and the Melbourne deal only happened because of me. He'll never admit any of that, Lucas said. I smiled coldly. That's why I keep my shares. I vote against every board decision, show up to every shareholder meeting, and remind everyone that he made a huge mistake letting me go. Lucas stood up, took a step toward me, then froze. Is that what you want? To spend your life battling us? I want what's mine, I said firmly. That's all I ever wanted. He studied me for a long moment. I'm sorry for everything. For not defending you. For letting them run over you. I shrugged off his apology. It doesn't change a thing. His voice cracked. I just needed you to hear it. He left without another word. I stayed in that tiny room for 10 minutes, letting my heart slow and the rush of adrenaline fade. When I finally stepped out, Diane was waiting. You okay? She asked. I turned down 25 million, I answered quietly. You did? Are you crazy? She laughed. Maybe, but you're also right. Sometimes being right means more than being rich. That night, Maya made me tell the whole story twice. You turned down 25 million? That's insane, Harper. That kind of money changes lives. The shares could be worth 47 million more after the IPO, if it goes well. If you get that far without them crushing you first. Maya wasn't trying to be harsh, just real. What if they bury you in lawsuits? What if you fight for years and end up with nothing? Then I end up with nothing, which is exactly where I am now, I said. I looked at her. At least I'll know I fought back. I won't let them erase me. Maya pulled me into a hug. You're either the bravest or the most stubborn person I know. I grinned. Can't I be both? My phone buzzed. It was a text from Diane. They want another meeting tomorrow. No lawyers this time, just James and you. I stared at the message, heart pounding. James wanted to meet in private, away from the safety net of lawyers, conference rooms, and onlookers. What should I do? I texted him back. But if you decide to go, make sure you record it. New York is a one-party consent state. Anything he says, we can use. I thought about confronting James without any protection, just hearing whatever he wanted to say when he thought no one else was listening. Set it up. I texted him for tomorrow afternoon. Maya looked at me confused. What's the move? Now I face the man who ruined my life and listen to what he has to say for himself. The meeting with James never took place. That Friday afternoon, Diane called with new information. They refused the private meeting. Instead, they were filing a motion to dismiss your claim as frivolous. Her voice carried a mix of amusement and satisfaction, which meant they were panicking. People who are confident don't file motions on Friday afternoons hoping no one will notice. What does this mean for us? It means we move faster. I'm filing with the SEC Monday morning at 9 o'clock sharp. By noon, this becomes public record. I sank down on Maya's couch, phone pressed to my ear. Public? I asked. Public, Diane confirmed. Every business news outlet will cover it. Your name will be everywhere. The White Sox won't be able to sweep this under the rug. I don't want to be in headlines, I said. I know, but Harper, you also don't want to be erased. Right now, those are your only choices. Go public or disappear. She paused. Sleep on it, but I need an answer by Sunday. I didn't sleep on it. I called back Saturday morning. File it. Monday morning, I was scrubbing a bathtub in Bronxville when my phone started buzzing nonstop. Maya first, then Catherine Brennan, then numbers I didn't recognize. I ignored them all until Mrs. Patterson knocked on the bathroom door. Harper, there's a reporter outside asking for you. My stomach dropped. A reporter said she was from Bloomberg, asking something about Whitmore Group. I finished cleaning quickly, grabbed my pay, and slipped out the back door to avoid her. I checked my phone in the car. 17 missed calls and 43 texts. Maya's message was simple. Turn on the news. I pulled up Bloomberg on my phone. The headline was blunt. Whitmore Group's IPO faces unexpected shareholder dispute. The article covered everything. My role in building their Asian infrastructure, the Melbourne deal, the automation systems, and the overlooked equity stake they forgot to terminate. By the time I finished reading, Reuters had picked up the story, then the Wall Street Journal, and Business Insider. By evening, I was trending on social media. That night, Maya showed me her phone, scrolling through Twitter. #Justice for Harper. House clear. Thousands of comments poured in, tens of thousands of women sharing stories of being fired after maternity leave, pushed out of family businesses, or discarded by companies they helped build. You're a hero, Maya said, her voice full of awe and disbelief. I'm not a hero, I answered. I'm just tired of being erased. But the attention felt overwhelming. Reporters called from numbers I never gave out. Somehow they found me through LinkedIn messages and Instagram DMs. Everyone wanted a comment, a quote, an interview. I ignored them all. Still, the articles kept coming. Some showed sympathy, outlining my work at Whitmore Group and interviewing former colleagues who confirmed my story. Others were skeptical, suggesting I was just an opportunist trying to exploit a loophole. Then Wednesday arrived with an even bigger surprise. Called my phone repeatedly. Numbers I never gave out, but somehow they tracked them down. LinkedIn messages, Instagram direct messages. Everyone wanted a comment, a quote, an interview. I ignored them all. The articles kept yawling on, some sympathetic, praising my contributions to Whitmore Group and featuring former colleagues who backed up my story. Others were skeptical, accusing me of opportunism or trying to exploit a technicality. On Wednesday, something new happened. Skeptical, suggesting I was an opportunist trying to exploit a technicality. Wednesday brought in, here's the article that turned everything upside down. The Wall Street Journal reached out to former colleagues, including David Chin, Whitmore's former VP of Operations. He called Harper Martinez the mastermind behind Whitmore's incredible turnaround. Everyone in the business knew it. Everyone except the Whitmores themselves. Letting her go was, without a doubt, the biggest mistake James Whitmore ever made. I saw her handle the Sydney contract negotiations. She saved us $3 million just by knowing the local logistics better than anyone else there. That wasn't luck, it was pure skill. Then my phone rang at 8 p.m. It was an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me pick up. Miss Martinez, Victoria Chin here. I'm the CFO of Meridian Holdings. Her voice was warm and professional. I'm not calling as a reporter. I want to talk business. What if you didn't have to scrap for leftovers from Whitmore? What if you had a chance to build something brand new? I sat up straighter. I'm listening. We're a private equity firm focused on logistics and supply chain investments. We've been watching the Whitmore drama closely. More importantly, we've been watching you. She paused. I want to discuss funding Martinez Global Logistics, $200 million in seed capital. You bring the expertise and leadership. We bring resources. $200 million with 60% initial equity that drops to 40% over 5 years if you hit your goals. Full operational control, co-title with us, guaranteed seat on the board. Victoria's confidence was crystal clear. Ms. Martinez, you built Whitmore Group into the giant it is today. Imagine what you can do if you start from the ground up on your own terms. I asked, why me, Mashi? Because you're not just another executive, Jennings. You're a story, the proof that talent beats pedigree. Hard work beats birthright. At a time when the world's tired of dynasties and nepotism, you're something rare. A woman who earned every bit of her success and got wrong for it. She paused before saying, this isn't just good business, Ms. Martinez. It's justice, and justice sells. We met on Thursday. Victoria's office was a different building, but had the same sleek vibe. Glass, steel, and money everywhere. Her team was sharp. Analysts, operations experts, market researchers. They had done their homework, knew my track record better than I did, and came armed with projections, market studies, and strategies. I read the term sheet 3 times. I called Diane, who reviewed it and said it was remarkably clean. By Friday afternoon, I signed it. Monday morning, the news dropped. Martinez Global Logistics was officially backed by $200 million of private equity. The new company was launching to compete head-on with Whitmore Group. Harper Martinez was named CEO. Whitmore's stock sank 4% within the first hour. Maya was at work when the news broke, but texted me a screenshot. You're trending again, but this time, you are not the victim. You're the threat. She was right, the story had flipped. Articles that once sympathized now sounded different. Former housekeeper starts rival company. Whitmore feud turns to fierce competition. Harper Martinez, from fired executive to CEO. At 2 p.m., my phone rang. It was James Whitmore. I stared at his name, then picked up. This is a declaration of war, he said. No hello, no small talk, just barely restrained anger. I tried to stay calm. I offered you more money than you could spend in 10 lifetimes, but you chose this path. I chose to build something no one can ever take away from me. My phone rang at 2 in the afternoon. James Whitmore's name was flashing on the screen. I stared, hesitated, then answered. "This is a declaration of war," he said. No hello, no small talk, just barely restrained fury. I tried to stay calm and reason with him. "I offered you more money than you'd see in 10 lifetimes, but you chose this. I chose to build something that can never be taken away from me." He said, "This isn't just a war, it's survival, and we will crush you. You think you understand this industry? You have no idea what you're really up against. I built your entire Asian expansion, James. I designed the automation systems you rely on. I negotiated your biggest deals. I know this game inside and out, and I know your weaknesses better than anyone else." The silence on the other end was thick, heavy with tension. Finally, he said, "You'll regret this." I replied, "Maybe, but if I regret it, it will be as a CEO, not as somebody who cleans your family's bathrooms." Then I hung up. That night, Maya came home with champagne, cheap store-brand stuff from the corner store, but somehow it felt just right. We toasted on her worn-out couch, the same couch that had been my refuge for months, witnessing my total breakdown and slow comeback. "You're really doing this," Maya said, half laughing, half scared. "You're actually going to take on them." I smiled. "No, I'm going to beat them." For the first time in months, it felt real. By the end of that week, I had 12 people working with me. 4 of them were former Whitmore employees who had quietly resigned and reached out after seeing the news, spotting the chance and wanting to be part of something new. 3 were consultants, experts in logistics, who had followed my career and wanted in. 2 were tech wizards Victoria had hired, young, eager, and brilliant. 1 was an HR director who had left the corporate world because she was tired of soulless companies. 1 was a CFO with 20 years of experience who said, "You remind me of myself 30 years ago." And the last was Marcus Chin, no relation to Victoria, he joked during his interview. He'd been my operations manager at Whitmore. Curious, I asked, "Why are you here? You had a solid job. Marcus would have promoted you eventually." He leaned forward and said, "When Marcus Whitmore took your job, he called a meeting and told everyone you'd been fired because you weren't family material, that you never really got the business, and you just got lucky with a few deals but lacked vision." He paused. Half the room knew it was nonsense, but the other half wanted to believe it because admitting the truth meant acknowledging they worked for people who crushed real talent out of spite. "But you gave me my first promotion. Harper took a chance on me when I was just an analyst with ideas, taught me everything about operations management, stayed late helping me prepare presentations, even though you were swamped with your own deadlines." He looked me in the eye. "I'm here because you deserve better than what they did to you, and because I want to help you prove them wrong." Sitting there in our makeshift office, surrounded by 12 people who believed in me, was validation I never realized I needed. We were real. We were on our way. And somewhere across the city, the Whitmores were feeling the weight of a huge mistake. The first 6 months of Martinez Global were a wild roller coaster, chaos wrapped in possibility. Beautiful, exhausting, terrifying chaos. We moved from that cramped temporary space into a real building in Long Island City. 3 floors with conference rooms furnished properly, not just folding tables. A break room where people gathered and laughed together. I hired an office manager to handle all the little things. A steady supply of coffee, printer paper. Those small details that make a company feel genuine. By March, we had 30 employees. By May, 60. By July, 87 people who had chosen to bet on me and the vision we were building. "You prepared for presentations even while juggling your own deadlines," you said, looking me in the eye. "I'm here because you deserve better than what they put you through, and because I want to help prove them wrong." Sitting there in our temporary office with 12 people who believed in me, I felt a validation I didn't even know I needed. We were real. We were happening. And somewhere far away, the Wetterers were finally starting to realize they had made a colossal mistake. We were happening. And somewhere across the city, the Wetterers were realizing they'd made a terrible mistake. The first half a year at Martinez Global was a whirlwind of chaos packed with opportunity, a wild ride that was thrilling, exhausting, and downright scary all at once. We moved from a cramped temporary spot to a proper office building in Long Island City. 3 full floors with real conference rooms, actual desks and chairs instead of folding tables, and a break room where the team gathered and shared laughs throughout the day. I hired an office manager who made sure the coffee was always brewing and the printer never ran out of paper. Those little details that make a company feel alive. By March, we were 30 strong. By May, 60. And by July, 87 people had put their faith in me and the vision we were crafting together. Together, our revenue forecast had been cautious. Victoria and her team projected $40 million for our first year. But by the time June rolled around, we were on pace to pull in $73 million. Every new client felt like proof that we were legitimate, that we could stand toe-to-toe, and that turning down that $25 million offer wasn't a mistake. Meanwhile, across town, the Whitmore Group was hitting rough waters. Their initial public offering, once set for March, was pushed back to May, then again to July. Investor confidence wavered, and the business press started digging. What was causing the delays? What was going on behind the scenes? When their first quarter earnings finally came out, it all made sense. Shrinking profit margins in Asia. Trouble with the Melbourne contract, the very contract I'd spent half a year negotiating. I had built it on trust and relationships, not just cold numbers. But it seems when you replace the person who forged those ties, those connections begin to crumble. Marcus Whitmore, the golden boy from art school, the one who found his place while I was building their empire, was now floundering, publicly and unmistakably. Forbes ran a feature in June titled The Revenge of Harper Martinez, showing how a fired executive resurrected a better company. The story was brutal toward Whitmore and glowing for Martinez Global. They interviewed clients, former colleagues, and industry experts. Everyone echoed the same sentiment. Harper Martinez was the true genius. The Whitmores had just been lucky to have her. While the public vindication felt powerful, the legal fight kept heating up. Whitmore threw filings at us one after the other. Diane labeled them frivolous claims, desperate attempts to find any loophole to strip me of my equity share. Diane challenged every one. The litigation was draining and costly. I surrendered over 20% of my stake in Martinez Global just to cover legal fees, refusing to let the Whitmores bury me in expenses. Some days I felt ready to quit, take whatever cash they dangled, and build my company free from this battlefield. Maya would find me in the office past midnight, eyes fixed on dense legal papers, and ask if it was worth it. I'd think of Isabella's mocking laugh, her derision, her ironclad belief that I was nothing, and I'd keep picking up the fight. One Tuesday morning, late July, Diane called. I was in a meeting about expanding operations across the Southeast. I saw her name on my phone, slipped out quietly, and said, "Tell me." The judge just ruled. Diane's voice held an unfamiliar note of pure satisfaction. Final verdict, your equity stake stands. All of it. 3% of the Whitmore Group is yours, free and clear. I sank down right there in the hallway, my legs suddenly unable to carry me. Say that again. You won, Harper, completely and decisively. The judge rejected every one of the Whitmore's arguments. Your equity is valid. It's been valid for a decade. They never terminated it before they can, and they can't now. How much is it worth, I asked. Based on their latest SEC filing from last week, Diane said, $47,400,000. She paused, then added, plus damages for the bad faith lawsuits. The judge ordered an extra $5,800,000 to cover legal fees and lost opportunities. $53,200,000. The number felt unreal, almost impossible to believe. 8 months ago, I was crashing on Maya's couch, cleaning toilets, making $95 a day. Harper, are you still there? Diane's voice cut through the silence. I'm here. My voice cracked. I need a moment. Take all the time you need. Bathrooms, hitting 95 uses a day. Harper, are you still with me? I was there. My voice cracked, rough around the edges. I just needed a moment. Take your moment has arrived. But there was still more to come. Diane's satisfaction grew even deeper as the judge's ruling included some powerful language. She stated, and I'm quoting exactly, Whitmore Group's efforts to invalidate Ms. Martinez's equity stake are clear examples of bad faith litigation aimed solely at stripping Ms. Martinez of her rightful ownership. The evidence reveals a calculated campaign to erase Ms. Martinez's contributions and shares through intimidation and blatant procedural abuse. The judge didn't hold back. She tore them apart. This ruling will be studied in corporate law classes for years to come. You didn't just win, Harper. You won in a way that paints them as petty, vindictive, and utterly incompetent. I closed my eyes, leaned my head back against the wall and thought, they'll probably offer a buyout within the hour. Want the money? It was the same question Diane had asked me months before. Take the cash and walk away. Move on. $53 million would have set me up for life. I could have expanded Martinez Global without investors, bought a real apartment, and never worried about money again. But I'd already built Martinez Global. I'd already proven I could succeed without their support. The money didn't hold the same power it used to. No, I said, I want the shares. The actual shares. I want my name listed in their prospectus. I want to sit at their annual meetings. You want them to see you every single time they celebrate the success I created. Yes, Diane laughed. That's exactly what I hoped you'd say. I'll file the paperwork this afternoon. By tomorrow, you'll be a registered shareholder. They'll have to include you in their IPO documents. They'll have to recognize you. The news spread like wildfire within hours. My phone blew up again. Reporters, investors, former colleagues reaching out. I ignored most of them. But when CNBC called for an interview, Diane urged me to take it. Control the story, she said. Tell your side before they do it for you. Jennifer Park was the anchor, sharp, seasoned, known for making executives squirm. We did the interview live at CNBC studios in Englewood Cliffs. Ms. Martinez, she began, you are now worth more than $50 million. You're leading a thriving competitor to the company that fired you. Does this feel like vindication? The question was straightforward, but my answer wasn't so simple. 6 months ago, I would have said yes without hesitation. Vindication was exactly what I wanted. Proof, validation, evidence that I mattered. But sitting there after building something new, something that was truly mine, the answer felt more layered. It feels like clarity, I finally said. For a long time, I doubted whether I'd made a real impact at Whitmore, whether my success was luck or skill, valuable or just useful. Now I know the market knows, the law knows. I built something tangible. No matter how hard they tried, your former employer tried to erase me, according to court documents. Yes, they did, but trying to erase someone doesn't make them vanish. It just reveals your fear of what that person truly represents. The clip went viral. Millions watched it, thousands of comments poured in, women sharing, men debating, business students dissecting it. The phrase, trying to erase someone doesn't make them disappear, even became a hashtag. Maya showed it to me that night as we sat in her apartment. I still hadn't moved out yet, always planning to, but caught up in urgent work. You're officially famous, she whispered, scrolling through Twitter. Harper Martinez, business visionary. I was just speaking my truth. Funny how the most important truths come out at the quietest moments. 3 days later, a courier showed up at my office. Friday afternoon, most of the office was already gone, heading into the weekend. I was alone, buried in contracts, when my assistant buzzed in. Harper, there's a delivery for you, signature required. The envelope felt weighty, made of high-end paper, the kind James Whitmore always used for his important letters. I signed for it, closed my office door behind me, and then carefully opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter, 2 pages long. His handwriting, unmistakable after a decade of memos and notes. Harper, I'm writing this against all advice from my lawyers, my family, and common sense. But some things have to be said straight. No lawyers, no press statements. You were right about expanding into Asia, about the automation systems, that Melbourne deal, how to treat employees, how to build real partnerships, how to lead with integrity instead of just power. You were right about everything, and my pride kept me from admitting it. When I brought you into Whitmore, I saw something I wish I'd seen in my own son. Talent, yes, but more, vision. The kind of vision that sees what needs to be done and has the guts to do it, even when it's tough. I thought if I could shape you, maybe I could prove leadership isn't just in bloodlines. But as you rose, it only made Marcus's shortcomings more obvious. Instead of facing that truth, I blamed you. I convinced myself you were the problem. Too ambitious, too bold, not family enough. Letting you go was the worst business mistake I ever made. Worse still, it was cruel. I knew exactly what I was doing. I knew firing you without warning at a family dinner would break you. And I wanted that. I wanted to punish you for being better than my son. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve it. I'm writing this just to admit you were right and I was wrong. Whatever success the Whitmore Group has now, you laid the foundation. You were the architect. We were just the name on the door. I read that letter 3 times. First anger, rage at his coldness and the damage he'd done to me. Then sorrow. For Lucas, for the years lost trying to fit into a family that never wanted me. Finally, acceptance. This letter was the closest thing to an apology James Whitmore would ever offer. The closest recognition I could ever hope for. I folded the letter, slipped it back into the envelope, and carefully filed it away. He didn't need my reply. He had to live with what he'd done. I had to keep building my legacy. The invitation came in September. Thick, heavy cardstock, embossed with elegant lettering, official and formal. The Whitmore Group cordially invites shareholder Harper Martinez to the annual meeting. Waldorf History, October 15th, 10 a.m. I stared at it for a long moment. My name printed there. Shareholder, not employee, not former anything. Shareholder. That evening, Maya found me holding the invitation. "Are you going?" she asked. "I don't know," I said. "Feels petty, like rubbing it in." She smiled gently. "Harper, you own part of that company now. You have every right to be there. Well, it might feel like rubbing it in, but Harper, you deserve this. You earned every bit of it fair and square. Any acknowledgement from Whitmore was slim, but this letter was as close as I'd get. I folded it carefully, slid it back into the envelope, and filed it away. James wasn't waiting for a reply. He had to live with his choices, and I had to keep pushing forward, building what I had started. The invitation came in September. Thick cardstock, embossed letters, formal and unmissable. The Whitmore Group officially invited shareholder Harper Martinez to their annual shareholder meeting. Waldorf History, October 15th, 10 a.m. I stared a long while at my name in print. Shareholder Harper Martinez, not just an employee or a former anything. Shareholder. Maya found me that night holding it. "Are you going?" I wasn't sure. It felt petty, like I was showing off. "Harper, you own part of that company," she said. "You have every right to be there." It still felt like rubbing salt in the wound, but Maya was right. This was my place now. Feels petty, like I'm rubbing it in. "Harper, you own part of that company. You have every right to be there." She hesitated for a moment. "But you don't have to go if you don't want to. You've already proven everything you set out to prove." I thought about that a lot, about what I truly needed versus what I simply wanted, about closure, vindication, and the fine line that separates them. Finally, I said, "I'm going." October 15th was unusually warm for the season. Folks called it Indian summer. I wore my sharpest suit, a tailored charcoal gray outfit bought with the profits from Martinez Global, not saved pennies or skipped meals, but money earned from building something real. The Waldorf Historia ballroom felt exactly as I imagined. Sparkling chandeliers, formal seating, an air of old money mixed with even older power. The room was packed with shareholders. I recognized a few from my Whitmore days, but most were strangers. I walked in confidently and took a seat in the 3rd row. Not front row, that felt too confrontational, but close enough to be seen. Close enough that I couldn't be overlooked. People started noticing. Whispers floated between neighbors. Phones came out to look me up, confirming they recognized me. The woman who had sued Whitmore. The woman who won. The woman whose company was now cutting into their profits. James and Marcus entered through a side door. James locked eyes with me right away. For a brief moment, we held the gaze, then he turned and made his way to the podium. "Good morning," he began, his voice still carrying that commanding tone I remembered. Thank you all for attending the Whitmore Group's annual shareholder meeting. The presentation was flawless, polished to a T, but the numbers told a much harsher story beneath the surface. Revenue was flat, profit margins shrinking, market share slipping, especially here in Asia, the very market I had built for them. The Melbourne contract, once their prized possession, was underperforming, and client retention was becoming a challenge, which was just corporate code for clients were leaving. James tried to paint a more optimistic picture, talking about market headwinds, transition phases, and strategic repositioning. But everyone in that room could read the truth in the financial reports. Whitmore Group was struggling badly. Marcus stepped up next, presenting the operational report. He fumbled through slides about supply chain improvements in automation systems that I was the one who designed and taught him about. He sounded like someone repeating a language he never really learned. When the Q&A started, an investor asked about the delayed initial public offering. James's answer was cautious, carefully crafted. We're waiting for the optimal market conditions. Translation: no one wanted to invest in a company that was losing ground to a competitor run by the woman they'd fired. I stayed silent throughout the entire meeting, saying nothing, not asking questions or making remarks, just sitting there, visible, undeniable, present. After the formal part ended, there was a reception with champagne and appetizers, people mingling and making small talk. As I made my way to the exit, Lucas stepped in front of me. "Harper," he said softly, "can we just talk for a minute?" He looked different. Thinner lines framed his eyes that hadn't been there the year before. His expensive suit hung a little loose, like he had lost weight but hadn't tailored his clothes yet. "1 minute," I said. We moved to a quiet corner away from the crowd. He held a glass of champagne but didn't touch it. "I read about your company," he said. "Martinez Global. The revenue, the expansion. You did it. You actually built something incredible." "I built what I was always meant to build," I replied calmly. He looked down at his glass. The company's market share was shrinking in Asia, the very market I'd built for them. The Melbourne contract, once their pride, was falling apart. Keeping clients was getting harder. Corporate speak for customers walking away. James tried to spin it positive, talking about market challenges, transition phases, and strategic shifts. But anyone who could read a financial report knew the truth. Whitmore Group was in trouble. Marcus put on the operational overview presentation. He stumbled through slides on supply chain tweaks and automation systems I had designed and even trained him to use. That room could read a financial report. Whitmore Group was struggling. Marcus presented the operational overview. He sounded like someone reciting a foreign language without really understanding it. During the Q&A, an investor pushed on the stalled IPO. James answered carefully. Terminology I taught him. He sounded like someone reciting a language they didn't actually speak. During the Q&A, we're waiting for the perfect market conditions. Translation: nobody wanted to back a company losing ground to a competitor run by the woman they had fired. I stayed silent the whole meeting. Didn't ask a question, didn't say a word. Just sat there, visible, present, impossible to ignore. When the formal session ended, there was a reception, champagne and tiny appetizers, a polite chatting and networking. I was making my way to the exit when Lucas stopped me. "Harper, his voice was gentle. "Can we talk for just a minute?" He looked different than the last time I'd seen him. The lines around his eyes were sharper, as if the past year had weighed on him. His suit was clearly expensive, but it hung a bit loosely, like he'd dropped weight and hadn't updated his wardrobe. "1 minute," I said. We found a quiet corner away from the crowd. He held a glass of champagne, untouched. "I've been following your company. You started Martinez Global. The revenue growth, the way you expanded. You built something real." "I built what I always knew I could," I said quietly. He looked down at his glass, then up again. "1 minute," I said. We found a corner away from the crowd. He held a glass of champagne he wasn't drinking. "I read about your company." He started Martinez Global. "The revenue numbers, the expansion. You did it. You actually built something incredible. I built what I was always capable of building." "I know." He looked down at his glass. I'm proud of you. I know, maybe I don't have the right to say that anymore. I lost that right the moment I stayed silent, while my own family tore you down. Still, I'm proud. I pictured this moment so many times, rehearsed every word, planning to make him feel small, just like he made me feel small. But standing there, looking at the man I loved for 12 long years, all I could feel was exhaustion. I'm sorry, Lucas went on, for everything, for not standing up for you, for choosing them over us, and for being too weak to do what was right. His voice wavered a little. You were the best thing in my world, and I broke it all because I was scared of my dad. And I know, not that I forgive you or that it's okay, just that simple truth. Are you happy? He asked gently. With your life, your company. Are you happy? I thought about that. Martinez Global, the team I built from the ground up, waking up excited instead of dreading my workday. About creating something honest, fair, and free of cruelty. Yes, I said, I am good. You deserve that, he said. He was about to say more, but stopped. I should let you go, but Harper, thank you for talking to me, for not making this harder than it ever had to be. I watched him disappear into the crowd of shareholders and investors. Part of me mourned what we lost, but mostly I felt a deep relief that I no longer needed his approval. I left the Waldorf and walked, not back to my office or apartment, but toward the East River, my new place, a cozy one-bedroom in Brooklyn Heights, leaving Maya's place behind. I stood by the same riverbank where just months ago at 4 in the morning, I'd been broken, fighting to remember who I was. The very spot where I made promises to myself, to survive, to prove them wrong, to refuse to be erased. I pulled out the velvet box from my purse. I'd carried it almost a whole year, the anniversary gift, a necklace with our intertwined initials. A jeweler had captured my hopes in every heart and loop as I whispered forever. I opened the box one last time. The necklace caught the afternoon sun, sparkling like something precious yet gone. It once meant everything, my marriage, my future, my belief that love and loyalty truly mattered. Now it was just forgotten metal, a memory I let go. I dropped it into the river. It barely made a splash, just a quiet ripple as it vanished beneath the water's surface. Some things we hold on to, others we set free. You are worthless, Harper. Isabella's cruel words were meant to shatter me, to convince me I was nothing without them. Instead, they fueled me. They proved the real weak ones are those who need cruelty to feel powerful. I didn't just survive. I rebuilt, showing that talent beats pedigree, hard work outshines birthright, and being underestimated can be the greatest advantage because no one sees you coming. I stood by the river, feeling lighter than I had in years. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus Chin, my operations manager, not the other Marcus. Client meeting went great. They're signing for 3 years. We're officially expanding into the Pacific Northwest. I smiled and typed back, excellent work. Celebrate with the team. Drinks are on me. Then another text from Maya. Dinner tonight at my place. I'm cooking real food, no ramen. I'll bring. Drinks are on me tonight. Just got another message. This time from Maya. She's inviting me over for dinner at her place. And guess what? She's cooking real food. No instant noodles this time. She'll bring the dessert. Wine, I said with a sigh. Then another message popped up. Victoria Chin from Meridian Holdings. She reminded me about the board meeting next week and said I needed to be ready to talk about our upcoming Series B funding. Our growth numbers are smashing all the forecasts. Great job, Harper, she added. I headed back toward the office, stepping into the life I had fought tooth and nail to build from absolutely nothing. Past tourists, street vendors, people hurrying to meetings that really meant something, and others that didn't. Past the buildings where I'd once worked, restaurants I'd shared meals with Lucas, streets I once knew as someone completely different. A full 5 years have passed since that shareholder meeting. Martinez Global Logistics is now valued at $1,200,000,000. We have offices in a dozen cities, partnerships across 4 continents, and a strong reputation for treating our employees as real people, not just assets to be used up and tossed away. Whitmore finally went public, but fell short of expectations. Their stock faltered. James called it quits a year and a half later. Marcus stepped down after 3 long years of decline. Lucas left the family company altogether and switched to consulting. I hear he's doing all right. I hope he is. I never remarried. I dated here and there, but nothing ever serious. Instead, I found true contentment in my work. Building a business that proves you can reach greatness without cruelty, that success doesn't have to cost your soul. Nowadays, business schools use my story as a case study, teaching lessons on corporate governance, resilience, and the contrast between building a company from the ground up versus inheriting one. Students write papers dissecting what the whites did wrong and what I did right. But I don't spend much time thinking about legacy or judging myself by headlines, case studies, or stock valuations. Instead, I measure my worth by the team I've built, the clients who place their trust in us, and employees who say Martinez Global has changed their lives because we treat them with respect and dignity. I measure it by waking up each day feeling excited instead of drained, by creating something honest and proving, mostly to myself, that I was never the worthless one. The whole journey was never about the money, never about revenge. It was about rising up every time life knocked me down, about refusing to accept someone else's judgment of your value, about building not once but twice, once for those who never appreciated it and once for yourself. And that second time, that's when you build something that truly stands the test of time. If Harper's amazing comeback story had you hooked from start to finish, go ahead and smash that like button right now. My absolute favorite moment was when she turned down $25 million, choosing dignity over easy money. What about you? Tell me your favorite moment down in the comments below. If you want more inspiring stories about fighting back after betrayal, don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a single video. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a new video.